Unless the eye catch fire, the god will not be seen. Unless the ear catch fire, the god will not be heard. Unless the tongue catch fire, the god will not be named. Unless the heart catch fire, the god will not be loved. Unless the mind catch fire, the god will not be known.
Welcome to Magic Without Fears, the Hermetic Podcast. David Rankine, thank you for being here today with me, with us. Welcome to the Frater RC show, brother. You're very welcome. It's been a long time coming. You've been again you're on the list of most requested guests, and it's been hard to ignore that for too long. Given any bookshelf I look at around me, there's at least several of your books on it. You've been one of the most prolific contributors to Western magic and, in my opinion, helped resuscitate the original practices that were almost lost, I'd say, throughout the heydays of the New Age from the 60s onwards, at least in my experience as a slightly younger man growing up with Scott Cunningham and the other New Age similar practices that I really love. I still love them, but of course the grimoires often seemed impenetrable. My Golden Dawn training helped me access them a little bit, but it wasn't until the work I was at Atlantis Books in 2005 or 6, and I saw Practical Angel Magic on the shelf, saw what it was, realized that it showed the separated tables of the Enochian Great Table, and realized in that 1 minute, like everything I've been told about Mathers being the genius to separate them was completely wrong. And then imagine my confusion and perplexity even more so when I realized we don't even know who separated them, it seems. And that was a work you put out with Stephen Skinner, Dr. Skinner, to initiate the sequence of books that now prevent most of us from buying homes. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, the first of the source works of ceremonial magic.
What was it like to put that first one out, and to were you shocked like I was by the revelation that the separation of the Great Table of Dr. John Dee into the 4 tables and the Tablet of Union wasn't something Mathers did, but was done by some unknown expander of the Dee manuscript?
I wasn't that surprised that Mathers hadn't done it, because to me it always felt like, Mathers's grimoires have always been like a bit of a two-edged sword. Like, it's great that he did them, but they all kind of have their flaws there in them, which are kind of a reflection of the time. And Mathers always seemed to be like staying a couple of lessons ahead of the people who were training the Golden Dawn with the way he was doing stuff. So, what he did was vital, but I'm not surprised. When I first met Stephen back in 2003, it was at the house he and a friend of his had in Chiswick in London. She introduced me to him, and we just clicked. Sometimes you meet someone and there's just that instant rapport. Within 5 minutes, he was like, "I got something I'd like to show you." And we went upstairs into this study, and he pulls out this huge old A3 size paper copy of a manuscript. And it was Sloane 307. And he said, "Have a look at this." And I looked through it. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think this needs to be put out and published." It's like, "Yeah, I've been thinking that for a long time." He said, "Should we do it together?" And I was like, "Yeah. Should we form a company and do stuff?" It's like, "Yeah." And that's how Golden Horde was born, literally in 5 minutes or so of us meeting. And so, at the time, Stephen was living out, in Malaysia, Singapore, and sort of used to visit London on occasion. So I was spending a lot of time then in the British Library looking at the manuscripts. I was there 5 days a week, from sort of 10 till 5 every day. I was literally living in the British Library for years. And Then I saw that going through the catalogues, there's Sloane 3821 is basically another version of the same manuscript. So we were working on that. And then one time he was visiting, and we went to Oxford to the Bodleian and looked through the manuscripts in the Bodleian, and then found there was like 2 Rawlinson manuscripts that had stuff in it as well. So they needed to also be referenced. I think it was 1361 and 1067. It was a couple like that. It's a long time ago now. I can't remember the manuscript numbers, but they're there in the front of the Practical Angel Magic. And yeah, it was just seeing, here is this really clear, lucid presentation, and it's, why wasn't that more publicized in the past? And it's clear that they were working from Sloane 307, because the appendix we put in that was copied from Alan Bennett's copy of the material that he had hand copied was straight from Sloane 307.
Yeah.
So it's like Mathers had taken some of Sloane 307, but not all of it. So it was like, this just needs to be out there, and that was the one to start it. And I mean, Stephen has that big thing with Enochian for a very long time. Like he did the beautiful edition of True and Faithful Relation by Merrick Casaubon back in 1970 or so, and with Donald Laycock, he did like the first Enochian dictionary. So he's got a long history with Enochian magic, and so it would be appropriate that be the one that started, came out as the first book from Golden Horde. And then, obviously, I was spending all the time in the British Library, and also quite a lot of time in the Wellcome, which is just down the road, which has a lot of great stuff in it as well. I'm going through all the catalogues and finding all these manuscripts. So I'm going, this needs to be. And whenever Stephen came and visited, we'd go together and we'd sit there, and I'd order up all the ones that I thought were good, and for him to sort of look at me, yeah, you're right, we need this. And it was like, oh, look at this Goetia of Dr. Rudd that's got all these really beautiful symbols, beautiful seals, and he's using the Sham Angels, the Goetic spirits, for example, which you don't see elsewhere. And it just kind of built on itself. We were just like, and there's so much important material that wasn't out there that we just wanted to try and make easily available to people, because that was before the libraries and universities were really putting much online as well. So most people did not have access to the manuscripts that we were sort of producing in full in the source works, and in some instances translating, like in the Key of Solomon. Obviously that were had to be translated, and Claves Spirituum, which was a swine to decode, because it was all the different magical languages, and then the bits in Latin contracted and reversed, and all of the fun we had doing that over a period of time. But yeah, I wasn't surprised though with regard to Mathers, but I was just surprised that people hadn't paid more attention to those manuscripts in the past.
What do you think the reason for that might have been, since they were just sitting there? We knew that Mathers spent a lot of time looking at manuscripts. It's how a lot of those fellows develop their systems or their schools or orders or supplementary teachings. What do you think? Why was it you and Stephen who sort of cracked the egg of traditional Western magic, if I'm not overstating the matter?
I don't know. There've been like a few, good books that had come out earlier. Stephen had done stuff with what was the name of his press he had in the 80s. My brain is having a heat moment. But he'd done like the fourth book of occult philosophy, for example. He'd done some really good books. You have people like Steve Savedow did his practice of Goetic evocation in the 90s.
Right. Yeah.
There were a few good books, like I said, Ouroboros. There were a few nice books that came out, but there wasn't it was erratic, and there wasn't really a consistency to it. And I think with Stephen and I, we brought a consistency. We're just going to work systematically through what we think are important books. and try and get them out there. And at the same time, Joseph Peterson was doing his amazing stuff and starting to put out these amazing editions as well, which kind of complemented what we were doing because we didn't work on any of the same books. So it's like we'd bring out some and then he was bringing out others. And it was great because they were just both adding to the field.
Yeah, Steve Savedown, I'm glad you mentioned that because he did put out, I think it was the 90s when his Retziel book came out, the Book of the Angel Retziel, and that was one I had and tried to penetrate as a younger person, but was thwarted. And then I found, of course, Sefer HaRazim. I have a nice little mini Hebrew copy of it that's this big. They have the mini ones. And when I first met Lon Milo Duquette, I got him to sign it for me, and it's a little treasure. Of course, now I have the proper. You're a big fan of this book as well, so I thought we could talk about this as well, the Sefer HaRazim, and and of course you've put out. You were part of the Sefer Ratziel version with Skinner as well in Golden Horde, or
No, that was
that was
with Don Carr, I think it was.
Don Carr. Yeah, it's hard
Yeah.
to. There's a few of you guys all working together, but yeah. So Steve Savedown does deserve quite a bit of credit as well for pioneering and pushing forward the popularizing of the traditional magical manuscripts and approaches. What was lacking, of course, was sort of some how-to guidebooks, which brings us right to why we're talking today about your fabulous new book, Claves Spirituum, which is the sequel to one of my favorites ever, Clavis Intelligentiarum, which of course corrects magical cameos made by Agrippa and is just a pleasure to read. Most of my students got it straight away, and my favorite conversations are when people want to talk about that and some of the implications for magical changes to our practice, especially even within the Golden Dawn system, which tends to have some more rigidity in it because there's the sort of the curia that created it of Mathers, Westcott, and all those other characters, right? It's tempting to become dogmatic about those fellows and their takes on things. And so it's always fun when fellow Golden Dawn magicians are interested in incorporating the new grimoire practice, which we owe to you. I'm so grateful that I was one in the 90s to always record the planetary hour of my work. You can see it in my diaries. I think I sort of went lax on it for a while, but no one else in the Golden Dawn at the time I did seem to really pay attention to that stuff. If I talked to other students, I was like, have you noticed any differences doing your middle pillar in different planetary hours? They'd be like, oh, I don't record that, or maybe they don't even record doing a middle pillar, right? So I kind of let it go. But then, of course, through all of the work you and your colleagues have done, it's come back, and you see brand new Golden Dawn people now coming up and saying, what about the planetary hour? What about that? What significance is that to this traditional GD ritual that doesn't have that as a key component? And so it's just great to see that's how you see organic tradition growth. And that's what you have pioneered. And with your new book, it is a guidebook on how to work with traditional grimoires. Your Claves Spirituum has rebirthed in a way even the role of the goddess within Solomonic magic, which often gets, people say it's often a bit patriarchal and overly masculine, and with all the threats and the pacts and the whatnot. So I think it's great how you've brought back the Shekinah into that. And you and Alexander Ethon Glitchbottle talked a lot about that. So I recommend people go check out that interview. We're not going to repeat the stuff that was said in that 3.5 hour epic conversation that everyone needs to hear. But we have new things to talk about for sure. Before we move on from Enochian stuff, I want to say thanks for being a part of EnochiaCon this year. It's happening right here down in beautiful Vancouver City Center and online. People can still attend and get tickets. We'll play a little advertising for it later on in this conversation. But first, we got to dig into some of the meat of Claves Spirituum and the influence and role it's going to have in the world. Once it comes out, it's pre-orderable now from Hadean Press, And yeah, you should go reserve your copy, but not too many copies because I haven't reserved mine yet and I don't want to miss out. So what was the idea behind it? Was it a struggle to write?
Not at all. Once I'd written Clavis Intelligentiarum, I was like, oh, okay, I'll just get back to, move on to the next project now. And then I was very quickly prompted that, like, no, you need to write, you need to expand on what you've done here. There's more to be said. And I got a lot of pushes from, spirits that I work with on an ongoing basis. And it's, I wouldn't say, that people say a book writes itself. I wouldn't have wrote itself, but I was certainly given so many pushes and prods. Like, you need to look at this. What about, the winds is a good example. It was like, you need to look at the winds. And I'm like, okay. So I start looking through the early grimoires. I look at Joe Peterson's copy of the Swan Book of Honorius. And hey, there's stuff on the winds in here, right? And this was before Stephen's book one of Summa Sacra Magica had come out. So I contacted Stephen and said, Stephen, can you send me what you've got on the winds from SSM, that you've got translated so I can look at it because I think I need to do some work with it. And he was like, yeah, of course. And he sent me, there's a particular chapter which has this conjuration of the winds. And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, okay, so I need to do this. So I did conjuration of Jophiel, the Jupiterian intelligence, because he's one I've worked with quite a bit. So I can get away with doing like a 3-day prep rather than a full 7 because of the relationship I have with him. And as a dad of a young child, 7-day prep is not so easy anymore. I'd have to rearrange a lot of things in my life to do that. So I'm tending to focus on the spirits I have ongoing relationships with. And I included the wind conjuration. And, he was there before the end of the first conjuration. I didn't need to repeat it. Well, Jophiel was there. And you could say, well, you've already got a relationship from having conjured him before, but still, it was very fast. So I asked him lots of questions. I asked him about working with the winds, and he gave me an extra line to add in. I asked him about working with the Shekinah and the Shekinah prayer that I'd included in my sequence, which is in Claves Spirituum, and he said yes, and about lots of other stuff. And then I was really happy with the result. I thought, okay, I need to test this. So I contacted loads of magicians I know around the globe and said, so I've got this, are you doing any conjurations soon? And if they said, yeah, I'd be like, I've got this wind conjuration, which is designed to bring the spirit to you quicker. Will you test it out for me, please? So lots of people tried it out and they did it with different spirits. And I said, just incorporate it in your sequence before you do the conjuration of the spirit. So there was people using the Arbitel and Ars Goetia and Grimoire Verum and Key of Solomon and various different grimoires. Every single person said the spirit is there by the end of the first conjuration. In some instances, because you name the spirit in the wind conjuration that you want them to bring, the spirit is there by the end of the wind conjuration. And it was 100% success so far. And I've also given it to a few people who have very little experience of conjuration. They also had success. So I was like, yeah, this could be quite a revolutionary thing. It's not that I'm introducing something new. I'm bringing something back that was there in those early grimoires. And it's the difference between expecting the spirit to walk to you and sending it an Uber, essentially. It's very much, it's a bit of grimoire tech that kind of slipped out after Swan Book of Honorius. You see mention of the winds in things like the Heptameron, but they're not being conjured in the same way. And then by sort of 16th century, the winds are pretty much completely gone. Then you get to the sort of more infernal period where it's a lot more grimoires focusing on demons. And in some of them, they actually say, you're going to have to do this conjuration 9 times. You're going to have to do it for hours. You have to repeat. But yet people who have been doing it with the winds, no, whether it's been demons, Olympic spirits, intelligences, angels, every time it's been there by the end of first conjuration. So yeah, that was quite an eye opener. And obviously, I was then started looking into it because there's bits of Summa Sacra Magicae that I've seen that haven't been translated, haven't been published yet, because it's only the first two of the 5 books in Stephen's book. So there's other talk about mention about the winds elsewhere in it as well, and so there's other little snippets which kind of point to qualities of the winds and their use. And so I've talked about that quite a lot in the the first chapter of the book in Return of the Winds. That made me think, and one of the mentions it mentions about it, the winds being in the 3rd book of Solomon, the 5 or 6 books of Solomon that Ganelus talks about, who's not King Solomon, but was a magician who is supposed to have been the initiator of Tos Grecus, Tos the Greek, and then Honorius of Thebes. And there's that little line, I'm going the wrong way on it's actually Solomon, Tos the Greek, Honorius of Thebes, to Ganelus. And that puts the use of the winds in sort of grimoire style magic back to the 12th century. And looking at Arab manuscripts, there's quite a lot of stuff with that. So I started looking further back, and then you find reference in the PGM with the Agathos daemon, with the winds being used to bring the spirit. And it's just like, here's something that's kind of slipped away, and we really, I can see why the spirits were pushing me to bring it back, because it was just something that had gone. That's actually one of the core practices of grimoire conjuration, is that conjuring the wind before you conjure the spirit. It makes such a difference, and every single person so far who's done it has made that difference for them.
So they took a look at us humans and said, "Hey, you have Ubers now. Can I start using mine again?" And you've provided their winds, the wing. Now, I think a lot of practitioners out there, some people out there will be wondering, direction of summoning a spirit often matters a lot in some of the grimoires. The direction you face, because you don't want to call a spirit and have it turn up behind you. You wouldn't answer your front door from your back and just stand there, right? How do people know which of the winds to work with?
Well, that's part of the beauty of the conjuration that you do it's the one from the Summa Sacra Magicae. You actually conjure 40 winds. There's winds for the different directions, groups of winds in each of there's actually 7 categories, all of them apart from northeast, because northeast is traditionally where you enter the circle from. So that's the one that doesn't have the winds attributed to. It's the one that doesn't have one of the sedes or seats in Tartarus, as well as the northeast. So that is my logic on that. Was you name all the 40 winds, and they go out and look, and wherever the spirit is, the nearest wind provides the transport from there to you. But we don't know what the spirits are up to when we're not calling them. They might not be in the direction that they would traditionally come from. They could be anywhere in the, on the astral, in the equivalent in the world. They might be off in a different country. You don't know. So I think it's like the wind brings the spirit in, and then it's kind of like a plain and final approach. If it comes from the direction that it was in, but then on final approach, it will veer and come from the direction of its home. That is the direction that it approaches the circle from. So let's say it happened to be in the west, but its home is in the south. It's like it will come close from the west, but then it will veer down and will actually approach your circle from the south, where your triangle or circle of manifestation is for it to engage through.
So it's sort of like how when we call an Uber, we don't call a particular Uber, we put out a message to all of them, and the closest one comes and gets us. I can't believe we can extend the Uber metaphor that far, but that was it's kind of fun. I think you started it, didn't you, with the Uber?
Yeah, I started it.
And it's an appropriate word. Before your Liber Spiritum, we had evocation, and now we have, as the Germans would say with your book, Über-Evokation. So it works. I'm just going to keep going with this the rest of the time, probably as long as you know me. So I hope you don't mind. We have a fun comment here. I just remembered that we have live comments, and here's Joseph H. Peterson. Hello, Joe, sir. Your ears must have been burning. May they are Totoros. I mean, yeah. I love the reference. That is a good reference. That was one of my favorite shows. I had Japanese friends growing up, and I was a big fan of that. Okay, where were we? So you call all the wins, all 40 wins, and one of them will hopefully, the spirit will be like, "Yep, that's my ride," and show up. Let's jump to one of the prepared questions I had, because I forgot. Someone asked me to ask Ash and Shasan about Ars Goetia. It was the one question I forgot, so I won't forget to ask it when it comes to you. Ars Goetia, do you think it's overused or overhyped? Why does it seem to receive more attention than other grimoires? And what does Claves Spirituum show us in contrast to such a grimoire?
Okay, I think a lot of the hype is because of the Crowley connection with the Ars Goetia. He got hold of Mavas's transcription and published it. There's actually a good example in this of how people don't tend to question when it's a famous person. Because Crowley put the bit about, translated from the hand of a dead man, being sarcastic about Mavas, who wasn't dead at the time. And if you look at all the editions that got published through the 70s, what have you, it would say, translated by MacGregor Mavas. But the Ars Goetia is in English. So it wasn't translated, it was transcribed. But nobody went, oh, hang on a minute. Mavas didn't translate it, he just copied it out. But nobody questioned it because, it's got Crowley and Mavas names on it. It's the same thing that happened with my realization with the Agrippa sigils for the intelligences and spirits. Nobody questioned Agrippa. And then when you actually use the Eight-Becker method, you see they're pretty much all wrong. He was doing funny things like combining the I and the A into an 11 rather than having the 10 and 1, and not reducing numbers when they should be. But going back to the Ars Goetia, that was one of the ones I worked in a lot in my first lodge. So I did quite a lot of work with the Ars Goetia, and in sort of following years from that. And I had success. I was never in a situation where we went as far as like the threatening stage with the spirits. They tended to turn up and do what was required. Then Stephen and I, we found the Rudd manuscript, and we put out Goetia of Dr. Rudd, where you work with the Shem angel as the sort of thwarting angel balancing the Goetic spirit. So it acts like as a protection for you, an extra layer of protection, and keeping it sort of under control. And I tested that because I'd done a lot of work with just Goetia without it in, so I did it with the Shem angels as well for a couple of the Goetic spirits I've worked with, because I've only worked with a few of them. I'm not one of these, you should try and work with every spirit people. They're not Pokemon cards that you collect. You work with spirit because there's a reason that it's going to do something. It's good at doing a specific task you want it to do, or it can give you information that you need. Otherwise, there's no point in working with the spirit. And from that perspective, I did it with a couple of the spirits. We're adding in the Shem angel. It worked just as effectively. Again, you could attribute that to familiarity, in that if you work with a spirit a few times over the years, they're more likely to turn up and be, if not particularly friendly, at least neutral to you, because there is that sense of respect that you've built up with the spirit from working with it. So I kind of feel like it is hyped in that it's brought in things like this, you've got to have the lion skin belt fetish and stuff like this, which I never did. And not having it never interfered with the conjuration for me or anyone else I know. And it's the one also that really emphasizes the domination. You will do this, control. If you don't do this, I'm going to curse you and put your name in the box and burn it, and all horrible smells and all the rest of it, which is from a specific time in, like, the Grimoire span. But that has become the one that a lot of people have measured the Grimoire tradition by, is the Ars Goetia, when it's actually not a very typical example, in my opinion, of the whole tradition. So yeah, I think a lot of it is the Crowley thing. I think people, it has this, because of that, has this sort of dark reputation. People, they get their Dark Lord or Edge Lord points for like, oh, I do ask Goetia and stuff. Like, big deal. Sorry, you can get the planetary intelligences or Olympic spirits can get you results just as good and probably far more easily than Goetic spirits can. It's just a matter of where your preferences lie. I I personally like working with intelligences and the Olympic spirits because they are much friendlier and very good at delivering on what's asked of them. So yeah, I think it has been a bit hyped. It works. I think it works better. Personally, I think it works better with the Shem stuff. A lot of controversy over it because people have said, "Oh no, Rudd just merged them together, just bunged them together." But so what did he do? He's a working magician. He was obviously working with a group of people back there in the like sort of 17th century. And he goes, okay, yeah, there's 72 Shem angels and there's these 72 Goetic spirits. Let's marry them and have them as 14 angels and see if it works. So people today who are going, oh, let's try this thing and put this together and this together and see if it works. But oh no, what Rudd did was, no, that's nonsense. But sorry, he was just doing what people do now of trying out new things and trying to evolve it centuries ago. So I get a bit irritated by the criticism of Rudd for the Shame Angel thing because it does work.
So that's interesting. I've been thinking about honestly trying it because I was one of those people who saw the criticism as having some reasonable basis. Again, I'm not opposed, as a Golden Dawner, I'm not opposed to new things or syncretism or experimentation, right? But because the number 72 of the Goetic spirits, right? The creation of, did you hear the spirit just whisper to us then? Was that just me who heard it? There was a weird sound. There was a weird sound effect that came across. Maybe it was something. So the number 72 is from Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, right? As compiled to sort of, poke fun at the hierarchy, the false hierarchy of demons. And so I think the reason people say, well, there wasn't 72. So if you line them up with the Shem angels, it's an artificial construction versus, oh, wait, the Shem angels are also an artificial construction by Christians, namely Johannes Reuchlin and Giovanni Pico and those early Christian Kabbalists who were Christianizing, or as we might say in the Golden Dawn, Yetzirifying the Briatic Shem names, the three-letter tetrad, the three-letter Shem names, adding the suffix and making them into Yetziratic angels, and so they can work with us better. I mean, that's about as constructed as the list of 72 from Johannes Vea. So yeah, I agree with your point there. And what's most interesting, I think, to most people is, does it work? And so that's something that I'm really glad you've said, because I've been tentative about trying to use the Shem angels as thwarting spirits for the Goetic spirits. And again, as I mentioned to you offline, Goetic work has never been a big thing for me, working with so-called demons. Mainly because I found at a young age that working with the Olympic spirit for Venus, there was a dark side to that spirit that kind of was shocking. And I realized, oh, maybe it doesn't matter if you're working with an angel or a demon or some other spirit. They might have all these, they're conditioned by different factors. They don't see the world the way we see it. And so, if you ask a question, they might give you an answer you consider dark and demonic, or one that's angelic and divine. But to the spirit, they might just be the same. Like, who are they to decide human morality or ethics? So
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things I talk about a bit in the book is like the danger of people seeing spirits as just being like invisible humans. They're not. They're completely different classes of entities who we have, at the end of the day, don't know that much about. We engage with them within a sort of set protocols and rules of engagement, if you like. which is what those core practices in the grimoires are about. That's why you have your magic circle. That's why you have your fragrance offerings. That's why you use the divine names, etc., etc. They are the established core practices that have provably, repeatedly worked for that sort of engagement. And that's what I've tried to focus on with the Claves books. It's that the template of what has worked for me in the 44 years I've been doing conjuration, and that I've refined and sort of developed and just stripped down to the extent of having what is necessary, but also trying to make it modern and to the point for today. I don't see the need to use oldie English, for example, in a conjuration, which is quite easy to trip over, which was appropriate then, but we don't speak like that anymore. So there's nothing wrong with modernizing it into modern English, which has a much easier flow for the conjurer than using all of the old terms. I mean, my one exception is I do like thine and thou because I think it has a certain gravitas to it. So I tend to leave that in.
So you're not saying some young buck should run out and create the grimoire, the Gen Z or Gen Alpha grimoire, written in their own language?
No. Modern English is perfectly fine if you're an English speaker. Obviously, if you're speaking French or Italian or Spanish or whatever German language it might be, then you'll be doing it in your native tongue.
My guess is that since the importance of sincerity is why it plays a role in the language we use. We change our way of speaking when we're talking to a justice of the peace or a police officer versus a grandmother or versus, say, our homies hanging out on a Friday night when we're young, right? We code switch, people like to call it. But why is it important? A lot of people have asked me, why is the formal language important, or why is that? And to me, I think it has to do with sincerity, but also this, the energy that formality and strangeness, like thee and thine, evokes within our souls, accessing the liminality, but also the sacred versus the profane, right? It accesses that sacred part of your heart that you experience when you first tell someone you love them or take vows to them, or, and there's a parallel, I think, to that with, that brings us sort of into the pacts we make with spirits. So language, the role of language, poetry, you've spoken a lot of that. And how does that, so yeah, what do you think of, over to you.
I really enjoyed you using the bit of Blake in the introduction. Thank you. That's there.
I don't know what inspired me to use that verse from Blake. People will have to wonder.
Yeah, from
or by the book.
I mean, Blake is one of my favourites. I love Blake stuff. Blake's so inspirational. It's like a sort of Gnostic visionary,
to see a world in a grain of sand,
Yeah, well, that's one of my all-time favourites.
Heaven in a wildflower.
I actually mentioned that one to Alexander the F the other day when we were talking about what was our favourite Blake quotes. Now
did you quote that?
Yeah.
I went up to visit a fellow GD guy when I was 17 for Easter break, and he was a memorizer of vast tomes of poetry. He had just finished memorizing Gibran's The Prophet and recited to me the night I got there after an 18-hour bus ride into the northern wilderness of Canada. Don't even ask where I was. It was a place that most would not think exists because BC is huge and beautiful. Wild stories from the north there. And I fell asleep after about 10 minutes, woke up 3 hours later because he had his back to me, his robe on and his arms out. So I heard Al Mustafa, the chosen one. And 10 minutes later, I was out like a light, woke up at the end after he'd done 3.5 hours of reciting from heart, the prophet. I didn't have the heart to tell him I fell asleep. But the next day he recited that Blake poem from memory, and it's stuck with me ever since. I hadn't encountered it actually before that, though I was a big reader of Blake. So poetry is something that you value highly and bring into your magical work. And it ties into sincerity, language, passion.
Yeah, and the beauty and elegance that you get in the flow of poetry is so inspirational. So I think that is like a key thing to bring in. There's little bits I've brought in to my sequence that people will see because I've got a revised version of the sequence from Claves Spirituum because the year between that going out and Claves Spirituum being finished, I had so many insights and things and little changes I made and bits I added, and the bits from the Song of Solomon, which I think are really beautiful and very poignant and appropriate at particular parts of the ceremony, for example, just because there's that lifting of the heart, of the soul that comes, I think, with poetry. And so, yeah, I don't think we should underestimate the power that are in those words that we can draw on and be elevated by.
Do you think the poetry song, I mean, this is a big thing in my life as a bard, you could say, but do you think it's something that it gives to the spirit, or is it something the spirit gets from us as a result of the change of state it causes? Like, there's a lot of dislike of psychological models and focusing on the psychological shifts when it comes to serious evocation in magic these days. But you don't seem afraid of discussing things such as that or visualization, for example. Are the two coming back together again?
The visualization thing, I think, is one of the most important things that really came from the Golden Dawn, to be honest. I think it's
That's
hugely,
refreshing to hear
hugely.
that said.
I think it's hugely important. The first lodge I was in was right from Stella Matutina, and so I did, work through a lot of the Golden Dawn material, although it was focusing on Grimoire conjuration in the lodge, which I'm very fortunate to have experienced, when I was younger. But yeah, the power of visualization, and being able to train your creative imagination is so vital. And to me, that was again one of the gaps with if you're consecrating stuff, why not add that visualization component in to what is going on there? Particularly when you're doing the way my perception with conjuration is, so you have your circle, you have your triangle or circle of manifestation with the crystal or your mirror in. That crystal or mirror is acting as a portal to the seat of Shamaim on the lower astral in the first heaven. And that's where the spirit will be seated to engage with you. If you've ever remote viewed or astral projected to around where people are doing ritual or conjuration, you can see the magic circle. You can see the aura on consecrated items, which they visualized when they consecrated it. That has a presence. It has a presence on the astral. It attract, and that build-up of all those consecrated items, all that sacredness, I think also contributes to the attraction of a spirit to your right. And so for me, visualization is actually a really important aspect of magic that I felt did not get any sort of treatment it's not there in the grimoires, although there's an intriguing reference in Summa Sacra Magicae, which to me hinted, is it possible that they did, that visualization was used? I'll just quickly see if I can find it, and where there's a mention of the, I think it talks about the divine light. Might be easier if I just.
That's interesting, and you might be chuffed to hear that I have a complimentary occasion of such an appearance. But I'm fascinated if the SSM includes that. And also people, if you attend EnokiaCon and support our new adventure, creating a new magical society of practitioners and academics, you still can. And David will be discussing the impact and significance of the SSM on all of us today. And that will be a fun, special, exclusive lecture through the Arcane Research Society and EnokiaCon this year. But you can attend that lecture as a course afterwards if you can attend the event at this time.
Yeah, I found the quote from
You
SSM.
found it. Great. See, I did, and didn't I fill that space in a well?
You did very nicely. It says, it's talking about conjuration. It says, and surround yourself with the divine light, the name of the character and divine words. Make your circle with the sword. Now, to me, surround yourself with the divine light sounds.
They're not talking about a physical substance, are they?
No, they're not, are they? To me, that sounds like an instruction. It's the only place in the grimoires I found something that sounds like it could be visualization. But it's a hint. I'm not saying people did visualization, but to me, that's like a hint that maybe some people did. Maybe it was there. So maybe I'm kind of introducing visualization into the grimoires, or maybe I've just touched on something that may have been there and fallen away and needed to be brought back.
I think you've discovered the second piece of the puzzle, because my buddy Lenny Peterson in Scotland, who has Hermetic Science Enterprises and put out a mysterious Fratter's Grimoire of the Discovery of Witchcraft, of Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft. So he made into a practical grimoire, and beautiful deluxe publication of it, and you can still get it available from Hermetic Science Enterprises. And Lenny said, I found in this a reference to visualizing of the pentagrams. It's the earliest reference we can see to visualizing the pentagrams. And I was like, wow, because I think a lot of people overlook Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft for a variety of reasons. And certainly no one's gone looking in it for perhaps potential origins of Golden Dawn LBRP practice, right? So between those 2 points of contact in those 2 texts, we have the beginning of an interesting observation, I'd say.
And that's all it takes to when stuff tends to start snowballing. It's like when I started looking for references as to what could be implying the Shekinah in conjurations and in different grimoires. I mean, I talked about that with Alexander, so we don't need to go off on that tangent again. But yeah, I think looking at things with fresh eyes. After I wrote, at the end of the 3 years of producing the Grimoire Encyclopedia, it gave me such a different panoramic perspective of the tradition that I was just looking at everything in a different way, because I was able to see connections I'd never made because I was looking across a whole span and go, oh yeah, you can see this from here went there, and trace so much more by looking at that whole picture. That as soon as I'd finished the Grimoire Encyclopedia, I then got sort of the push to do Claves and get practical stuff written. It was like, okay, now you need to get on with writing the manual stuff.
And I'm so glad you did. I can't wait to have the sister to this beautiful book in my hands. And I'm so glad they put out more in hardcover, because it's nice, especially to have these little ones. They're beautifully done. I love the color. And you've done so many nice. You've done some big books, some big multi-volume books that take up a lot of space and are heavy. But you've also done some beautiful little ones. One of my favorite ones that I actually think I've used to replace an entire GD lesson on the Hebrew letters. I just give my students your Sefer Yetzirah magic book and say, you don't need to learn all of this at the beginning, but here's the best little introduction to understanding. That's what every neophyte in the Golden Dawn should be handed. Not not just the plain list of letters, but your text, because it also can take you if someone's really interested in going further, faster, they can do that with your Sefer Yetzirah magic. So you have and it's a little book. I was shocked how little it was, but I was delighted as well, because little books have some benefits. You can read them quickly. So yeah, it'll be great to have the sequel to this and a practical manual as well. Let's I have so many questions for you. I hope you don't have to go too soon.
No.
You mentioned the risk of spiteful spirits. Again, when talking with Alex, but I've heard you mention it before. What makes spirits spiteful, and is it in their nature, or rather the results of being maybe mistreated or conjured incorrectly?
I think the first thing is like you look at grimoires like the Arbiter, and it talks about how the spirits can read the heart, as it were, of the person's conjuring them, or the intentions. So if they're being conjured and not with good intentions, the spirits are immediately more likely to, if they turn up, react more negatively. You know, the the integrity, the sincerity, the piousness of the conjurer goes a long way to ensuring the spirits responding in a positive manner to them. So I think that's a factor. Not specifically spite, but I think they also, if you don't follow the protocols, that is something that a lot of the spirits don't seem to like. One of my friends who I asked to do the wind conjuration, he said, "Oh, I'm going to be doing conjuration of Bethor, the Jupiterian Olympic spirit." And I said, "Oh, can you put the wind conjuration in, see how it goes?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course." So him and his seer were doing the conjuration. He did the wind conjuration, and then he started doing the conjuration of Bethor, and the seer said, "I can see him." He carried on doing the conjuration, but he got distracted and he recited a bit of the conjuration wrong. And Bethor said to the seer, "Tell him to restart. I'm not going to talk to you until he's done my whole conjuration properly." So even though he was already present, it's like, no, I expect all of the words said properly as it's kind of like part of the protocol, and then I will talk to you. So I think that if people don't follow the protocols, that is something that can also make the spirits feel more inclined to be less positive, let's say, in their engagement. I certainly, with any of the celestials, I don't think spiteful is a term I would ever be inclined to use, or the Olympics. I mean, with the infernals, it's such a wide range, of different sort of demons. It's really hard to generalize. I mean, I think there are a few that are more malevolent by nature, so spiteful would fit in with them, and who have to be incredibly careful and really be in sort of lawyer legalese mode with every thing that's said in the engagement, incredibly precise with the language and not give them any loopholes. But then if a spirit's like that, I don't really feel inclined to personally to work with it. I don't understand the allure.
The risk reward seems
that can give you a hard
lopsided.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why go for spirits that might give you a hard time if you can get equally good results with other spirits that are going to be a lot easier to create an ongoing positive relationship with? It just doesn't really make sense to me. Because at the end of the day, people think, oh, it's really hardcore to use the R's Goetia. Mate, it's hardcore to do any conjuration of spirits. It doesn't matter what grimoire it is. If you are putting in the effort that you do all that, you get your tools and you do all the purification and preparation and everything, and you do the timings, etc. Any grimoire, that has been like a serious hardcore process of purification and preparation. It being the Ars Goetia doesn't give you extra brownie points, as far as I'm concerned. But
right. Yeah, that makes sense. So it leads into actually we sort of talked about this. Let me jump over that. When it comes to dealing with spirit feasts and appropriate places, you talk about the genius loci, the spirit of a place, and how do you say that kind of working, which is becoming more popular again, which is nice to see. I mean, Frater Acher is a big champion of that methodology, and I think for me, as a lover of the as a lover, unashamed lover of fairy Wicca, let's put it that way. I've always, since being a kid, looked for the fairies, because in Waldorf school we're taught to, in kindergarten especially, and leaving offerings of milk and cream and things like that in under the lavender bushes. And when I started practicing magic, it seemed that kind of mentality was very much not on vogue at all, but it's coming back. Why should we work with the spirits of a place? It makes it's when there's all these powerful demons and angels that are not tied to places on Earth.
Okay, so there's, I suppose, different angles here. The first is a lot of people tend to work indoors now because it's more comfortable. You go back to the Grimoire period, Middle Ages, Renaissance, the Grimoires, generally they talk about working out in nature or in old ruins, away from people. Because obviously, if you're doing something that the church is not going to approve of and consider heretical, you could end up dead or in serious trouble at the very least. So, something where you're going to be burning all these fragrances and chanting like all these strange names in Hebrew and all the rest of it, is going to draw a lot of attention in the middle of a town or a village. So it was generally done outdoors. And it's very different working outdoors to working indoors. I tend to work outdoors as much as possible when I do conjuration. Certainly it's not practical where I live now and family and things. I would not be comfortable doing the conjuration at home, so it has to be away from home for me. And if you are going to work outdoors, then it's important to remember that the spirits that are named in those spirit lists and spirit catalogues in the various grimoires that we have are only a small amount of the spirits that exist. There's a huge number of others around that we don't know the names or functions of necessarily. And spirits of place have been around since time immemorial. It's basic courtesy apart from anything else. If you are looking for a site to do a conjuration, to try and engage with the spirits of the place and make sure they're going to be happy with you doing the conjuration there, so building up a relationship first. So that is something I talk about a lot. You find a suitable venue, first of all, before you even ask the permission, show willing, make sure that you go there regularly, make sure it's clean, there's no rubbish, pick anything up, make offerings that are appropriate from the local environment. I talk about that as well, that look at the ecology of the place. Things like apples, nuts, things like they're quite common. But apples that are bought from a local farm or a local farmers market, not ones that have been brought in from another country. Things that are actually local to the area. Milk that you've got and locally, whatever it might be, and show your sincerity to the spirits of the place. Start to build up a relationship. Ask their permission to work there, because just because they're not named somewhere doesn't mean they don't have the ability to do things and to interfere with what you might want to do in their backyard, as it were. People, I think, can be quite dismissive of what they consider lower spirits or elementals things, when they can be tremendously powerful. And just going somewhere and going, right, I'm going to do my conjuration here without making any effort to contact the spirits, and set up your magic circle. You might do banishings and stuff, and it's like, in human terms, that would be like somebody turning up at your house, bursting in, pointing a gun at you, and saying, "Sod off and don't come back for a few hours. We're going to have a party in your house now." You know what I mean? It's when you put it in that sort of analogy, it makes you think, hang on, actually, I need to be respectful. And if you do start to work with genius loci and engage with them, you can learn a hell of a lot from them as well. That you can have a completely different kind of relationship that's not one where you have to go and do big conjurations and lots of preparation, but by listening to the spirit of the place and spending time there, that's much more akin to, I suppose, like the sort of druidic bardic I shudder to hesitate to say it, but even shamanic angle of engaging with the environment and the spirits of the place and of the environment and learning from them. Because, it's like every grimoire, somebody had to get it from a spirit at some point before it got written down. So there's not, from that perspective, working with spirits of a place and them saying this, do this and this and this particular thing, and then you find that works really well for you, and great. That's, you have been taught magic by a spirit, just in a different context to having gone and done a big, grimoire conjuration. So for me, working with genius loci is an important and it's a significant thing to do if you're going to work outdoors, to develop that relationship first and make sure that the spirit is going to be happy with you doing that conjuration in their place.
Yeah, it's hard when we're in cities. I'm curious. I have a couple questions here, but I used to work down for full moons just on the beach near the Stanley Park where I live. Then we had a whole new, the last few years, a whole influx of tourists who realized they could get a lot of views by doing selfies with coyotes. So they started feeding them. And now it's not safe for humans to go out there at night unless you want to get ganged up on by coyotes. So there goes that magical spot, unless, and we can't really carry firearms here, so we can't protect ourselves if a pack of coyotes decides to, and I've seen people's ripped apart by them in Canada before. So that's unfortunate that we've fallen so out of sync with nature that we see it as this spectacle to put on social media for views and no longer even respect. Like, you can't forget about respecting the genius loci. We can't even respect the animals that are there, and we're messing up their habitat and feeding them for selfies. And of course, the upside of that is occasionally you see the animals throw a person in the air, and you think you feel a little bit like, yeah, you kind of deserve that, though of course it's usually horrific and fatal, so that's not good. But the relationship to nature is so important. How dangerous do you think it is to do some of these operations and work with some of these spirits when you live in a downtown apartment building like I do? Like,
When I did the first Claves book, I talked about the ideal of having 2 or 3 people. And I think some people might have got slightly disheartened by that. Claves Spirituum, I focus much more on the solitary practitioner, because most people that do conjuration are doing it alone. And the majority of my conjurations have been by myself. I've done some with other people and in groups. But for most people, most of the time, it's going to be solo. And if, of necessity, it's indoors, your factors you've got to consider then are, if you're living in shared environment, it becomes a bit more difficult. But also things like pets and children in the environment if you're in your home. So that's again where I would then be looking at the sort of conjuration I'm doing, and would lean towards, if there's any children in the house, or like I say, you have sensitive animals like dogs, cats, and others. They're going to pick up on spirits turning up, even if they're on the lower astral, superimposed over the physicality of your house. That cat is still going to sense it, for example. But it's okay, and there's precautions to take with regard to things like, turning off electrical stuff that you can, and turn off the doorbell and things that might disturb you, and phone off, and all the standards, smoke detector temporarily, etc. But I would, in that instance, say, if you're going to do that in those sort of circumstances, do not go towards the infernals. Stick with the ones that are going to be a benevolent presence, that there's no risk of there being any bleed over that's not positive into the environment around you. Is the short and sweetness of it. Now, if you're going to do stuff with the infernals, I think that's better done away from people where there's no risk of the influence bleeding into the environment where it could affect other people, because you do have to be responsible for your actions. If you're doing conjuration, that's quite a serious magical action. And there is also to consider that if you do an infernal conjuration, your other infernals might pop along to have a look at what's going on. So they might be on the astral nearby, not constrained by your circle or your triangular manifestation, and they can't get into your circle, but there's other places around there that aren't in your circle, for example. So yeah, I think you do need to be responsible if you're working indoors in an urban environment, and consider what you're calling up.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. Here's a question someone asked. It's a viewer question. Let's ask it. What would the ultimate purpose be for conjuring angels and practicing magic? Does one have to have knowledge of everything to do justice with power? It's
Okay, for me, the ultimate purpose of magic is to realize your own personal genius and become the best person you can be. I like the Friends of the Earth. I think it's Friends of the Earth who say, think global, act local. And as you follow a magical path, you develop yourself and try to become the best you can and do as much good as you can for others around you. So it's like you are trying to spread that positivity through the interactions you have with other people, whether it's just smiling at somebody on the street, helping somebody with something, all the little things, and how you engage with the world, avoiding being negative, not profaning your mouth by swearing, which we're all guilty of at times, but we can try and minimize it and not do it, particularly if you're preparing to do conjuration.
yeah.
So you become like so that goodness emanates from you and spreads out into the world. And the more people there are doing that, the more that ink blots on a page start to sort of come together and make that page just the whole one color. That the more people doing that, the more we can try and spread that. Because let's face it, the world's in such a state that we need as many people trying to, radiate positivity into the world in every way they can. And for me, the practice of magic is, at the end of the day, it's a path of service. You become the best person you can be, but you are also, for me, it's the great work. People say magic is the great work. What is the great work? It's the work of making yourself great, and through yourself, humanity. It's the next evolutionary step, is to try and lift everybody up into like a better existence. And that's why the Celestials often encourage people, for example, to get involved in charitable work. There's so many things that come into it when you start practicing magic that change the person you are to become a better person. And so for me, the purpose of practicing magic is to become the best you can be and to contribute to making the world a better place. And that's why you would conjure angels or other spirits as well, for them to do tasks which assist that process or give you knowledge which assist in your understanding to move along in that process as well.
So the same person amended their question saying, what if you're not interested in what the earthly realm has to offer? So I think we have an existential crisis type question for you, brother.
If you're not interested in what the earthly realm has to offer, then you should still be interested in becoming the best, most perfect entity you can be in it. Even if you're not wanting to radiate out and try and help the world, at the end of the day, I think the natural urge of life is to evolve. And from that perspective, you can just spend your life, in a hollow, empty way, or you can try and live your life and experience things. And the better you become, the more rich your world is, and the more you experience it, the more wonder you see in the world. So I can't kind of get into this existential thing, I'm afraid. It's too alien to me. We have periods in our life. You can get quite jaded at times. like my daughter is kind of, what, 2 years and 4 months old, and seeing the wonder that she sees the world with, it just has completely taken me back into that, that place of joy and wonder as a daily experience of seeing that, seeing life from the perspective of a young child. And that's an immense gift. At the end of the day, she is like the heart of my world.
Yeah.
And having her around and seeing how she engages with the world just, again, makes me want the world to be a better place for her to be in it.
Yeah, people can probably find the wonder themselves if they get off TikTok and go outside in nature. I mean, that's what their early Hermetica texts say about initiation to the Way of Hermes. Just go outside and revere and wonder at what is beyond what your senses experience. So through your sensual engagement with nature and creation, wonder and revere beyond that, and you'll start to awaken to something else. So that's fascinating.
I read something a while back that said a person today sees more images in 3 days than someone living in the Middle Ages would have seen in their entire life, which I find quite
That is
mind.
shocking. Yeah, it is mind-blowing.
And so, I mean, social media, I don't really do social media much. I'm on Facebook and that's about it. I don't
Yeah.
do,
Yeah,
I've got an
smart man.
Instagram account. I post on very occasionally, but I'm
It's
not
not real.
interested in, yeah, yeah.
No.
I'm not going to waste my time, on, I have better things to do with my life than, be doom scrolling or getting wrapped up in all of this sort of online fantasy. Like you
I
say,
mean,
getting,
we're lucky we missed that, right? Growing up, like I've never doom scrolled. I don't know what it is. I don't understand the impulse. But then that also makes me realize I'm grateful that I didn't grow up in a culture where I probably would have been a doom scroller if I was younger, right? And it makes me really sad, of course, and empathetic to the struggles of this era. It's so easy to write it off, as a Gen Xer and be like, oh, you know, they're all screwed. Their brains. That's a horrible way to think of it. And also, it's not true. The younger people are engaging with the world with different challenges than we had. We had a lack of connection and access to knowledge and resources, right? We just did. Like if I bought a book on Celtic stuff and wanted to know more, all I could do is write to the Dublin Institute of Advanced Studies. They'd send me a catalog for manuscript photocopies that I could never afford in a million years, and that was it. That my search was over, and there was nothing else I could find. So the overstimulation is the price you pay for the wealth of knowledge and resources that are there today for people. Here's another great viewer question. Just curious, David Rankine, have you met your HGA? If yes, what system did you use to gain knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel? And I'd like to add an amendment to your question. What's your thoughts on the insistence by practitioners of the Abramelin that it's a different HGA than all the other HGAs? Because certainly that is something you don't want to imply to an Abramelin person that you did the equivalent by doing Liber Samek or the Golden Dawn system or working with Skirlin in the Verum. So what's your thoughts on this controversy? It's a very fun controversy.
I've kind of kept my mouth shut on this because both of these would probably be quite controversial.
So I'm getting a scoop.
I have not done the Abramelin. I've always been very clear about that. That's not a practice I've done. I've not had the 6-month slot available to do it, or the 18-month slot, as it would be if you're doing the full one, from the German. I certainly had experience when I was younger that people might equate to knowledge and conversation of the HGA, where I was in I suppose, a samadhi state, where I became one with the universe, completely dissolution of ego, and in that, when I came back from that state, I had the name in my head with a vision of the figure of the HTA. But I've not tended to engage with it much over the years. Knowledge and conversation of the HJ is not something that I'm particularly interested in at the end of the day.
You're kind of a man after my own heart when you say that. I have nothing against the Abramelin, but it's never had the shine that for me that it does for other people. Other than the fact that Mathers is the one who discovered it and did it, and I have the German copy, and if I was to do it, I would do the 18-month German one in German because that would be fun. But I don't know if I need it. You know, I spent 7 years doing Golden Dawn training, having a similar experience of awakening to the higher nous or higher consciousness. And I certainly have servient spirits and holy spirits I've worked with my whole life. Why do I need this Grimoire's one?
Yeah. I have met people who have told me they've done the Abramelin, and I've watched their behaviour and I thought, well, if you've successfully done the Abramelin and have knowledge and conversation, why do you behave like such a rude arsehole at times? Why isn't your HTA pulling you up for behaving inappropriately, or which led me to then wonder if that person was just claiming to have done it rather than actually successfully done it. I have spirits that I work with who give me excellent advice. I have personal spirits from one of the systems that I practice, and other spirits that I've, some of which aren't in grimoires that I've acted with over the years, who have been tremendously helpful to me. But I suppose I'm very much a free will kind of person, so the whole HTA thing seems very wrapped up with a fatalistic approach, and so it's not something I've been that fussed about.
Yeah, I people are appreciating to hear your thoughts on this, so I thought I'd show you that. Yes, and Steve will be here at EnokiaCon in person, so you'll get to hear about your special presentation on the SSM. I have some amazing questions still for you, including asking you about magical staves. Before I cut to a little promo clip for our conference, is there any teaser line other than the title that you've already supplied that you could use to tease people's interest in attending and listening to your brilliant presentation this weekend?
I think you'll enjoy the stuff about what Dee gained from the SSM when it was in his hands and how much it influenced the development of Enochian.
Well, without further ado, we'll be right back after these messages.
Canada's only occult conference returns this July 11th to 13th. EnokiaCon is an opportunity to come together with leading scholars of esotericism and practitioners of Western occultism in a friendly and open environment in Vancouver, Canada. This year in 2025, with presentations by an amazing group of presenters, including Dr. Justin Sledge, Dr. Terry Burns, Father Aaron Leach, Dr. Sasha Chato, Frater Eleftheria of Lifting the Lamp, Dr. David Litwa, Chris Trenholm, Daniel Rekshan, David Rankine, Ike Baker, and P.D. Newman. You can also attend live online and experience premier presentations of cutting-edge research and discoveries, and experience beautiful British Columbia. Register to become a member and you also get included 2 upcoming winter workshops and access to Dr. Sasha Chato's phenomenal year-long undergraduate level course to introduce you to the academic study of Western esotericism. This is not even available at universities at the undergraduate level, but will be included now for everyone who registers to EnokiaCon 2025 before July. Tarry not and sign up today. Go to EnokiaCon.com or ArcaneResearchSociety.com for more information.
All right, people. So you still have time to attend live online or in person, though definitely seating is filling up in person, and and we're doing it dead center downtown. That's where the event's being held, um, and yeah, so it's going to be good. Everything's in place, and I've gotten like triplicates of every cable we need, for example. So there's redundancies on redundancies, all that sort of preparation. I want to ask you about magical staves because the magical staff is not often discussed, but it is in your new book. How do you use the staff, and what materials and methods do you use for finding and consecrating it? W.B. Yeats actually uses blue staves as key tools in his Order of Celtic Mysteries. Is there a grimoiric provenance for magical staves?
Staffs turn up quite a lot in Grimoires, particularly in the Faustian stuff, in the German tradition. But yeah, we do see the staffs a lot. It's almost sort of interchangeable at times with the sword as the commanding tool of the conjurer. And the wood tends to vary, but it's that similar thing of it having to be cut at a particular time, usually like on a waxing moon, at sunrise on a Wednesday, so it's in the hour of Mercury on the day of Mercury, with a single stroke. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense because there'd be a lot of people who back then would not have easily been able to carry a sword without it being noticeable. If you think a staff is a lot more inconspicuous than a sword, if you're not, particularly if you're, for example, a monk who's doing stuff that's considered very dodgy,
Mm.
or somebody who's not nobility or military, why would you have a sword? For a lot of people, so I think there's the practical reasons, and also anyone could make their own staff. It's a tool that you can create, whereas not you need a blacksmith to make a sword. So you can put all the energy into the creation of a staff. So from that perspective, I think you can have more of a personal connection by chopping it and then doing all of the work preparing and creating that staff. So you have a very strong connection between you and that staff as a tool.
I always found my staves appeared when I needed them, remarkably. Once I realized I needed something more than the staff I had, which was a bit thin, though I'd carved it beautifully as best I could as a 13-year-old. And then I knew I needed one bigger, one sturdier, one that was larger. And I was walking just down the complex road in North Vancouver. And there it was, laying. It wasn't in the woods. The trees are everywhere in Vancouver, of course, but it wasn't in the woods. It was on the path next to a apartment complex, partially on the path, partly just in the grass near a main road. And it was there and it was perfect. It was beautiful and it was massive and just the right kind of thinner at the bottom, thicker at the top, and just perfect. So I do like that aspect of you talking about staves, that they're more likely to manifest or appear to you on your own without you having to go and get someone else to make one for you. And that's what's the most common wood you find them made of in the grimoires? Is there a common wood
Hazel,
like hazel or hazel?
yeah, hazel.
Okay, hazel. All
But
right,
if I have a
excellent.
small one that's the wooden part's about so big, and it's a yew. It's from a 2,000-year-old yew tree in Cornwall. I was sitting under going back to the 80s now, and I sat under the yew tree and I was like, sort of trying to commune with the tree, and I said, I'd really appreciate a wand, and then this thing just dropped on my head. Thank you very much.
Wow. One of my
Um,
first wands was a yew wand as well. Yeah, one of my first Celtic Magic DJ Conway style yew wands. A wand was a yew tree. That's amazing.
yeah, this yew
The
wand
wood,
has a crowfoot on the end, and it was my Morrigan wand.
mine had that foot. That's so crazy. That's so crazy. Yeah, I miss my old collection of staves and wands, but I lost everything at a certain point in life. So I've been rebuilding, recollecting, rediscovering. Here, so that's a great. I'm glad we got to touch on magical staves, and I didn't forget. Um, oh, we've gone over a lot of my questions that were prepared. In fact, What are the most common? You've mentioned in previous interviews an enviable amount of phenomena and spirit signs that you've experienced. What would you say are the most common signs of a spirit's presence? And should people act as if the spirit is there, even if it is not quote unquote present and or attentive to the conjurer?
Okay, so the most common, I suppose, physical signs, or signs that you pick up with your senses for spirit presence, I would say, are pressure change if you're indoors, temperature change, either dropping or rising, unexpected noises or gusts of wind in the room, things falling over, the classic hairs on the back of your neck or your arms rising, possibly seeing like little out of the corner of your eye, like little sparkles or things, and sometimes smells as well, like a fragrance that you don't expect to be there. Those are the sort of most common. There's something present even if you can't see it. And there is that thing, and a lot of people can be put off by going, well, I don't, I'm not very psychic and I don't think I'm going to see anything in the crystal, or how will I know the spirit's there? And this is something I've been asking, because I've been running the online course, and I got asked it on the first time I did that. So one of the things I added in Claves Spirituum was actually on using one of the pentacles that's in Mavaz's Key of Solomon, which is the one to make invisible spirits that have been conjured visible, to make them appear. So I've talked about using that and having that present, so that if you've done the conjuration and you don't see anything, to like show that pentacle to the crystal, so that if you have called it and it's just not making itself visible, to actually get that spirit to appear so that you can see it in there. Because that's one thing, going back to visualization from earlier in our conversation as well. Practicing visualization on a regular basis, and I encourage people to practice it daily for years because it really develops the mental muscles. You might think, well, what does it achieve? Well, I'll tell you one other thing apart from the benefits of being able to harness your creative imagination and develop it. You do visualization on a daily basis, it will improve your psychism from the point of view of spirit engagement. It does make you more able to pick up on things and see them. Because the thing to remember is, when you engage in that spirit and you're scrying into a crystal or mirror, often you will see it in your mind's eye. And so if you've developed your powers of visualization, it's a lot easier to engage that when you are scrying. It depends on your scrying technique as well. If you do it with sort of your eyes lidded, or how you scry and having the light behind it and things. So yeah, I would argue that practicing visualization does help develop psychism from the point of view of engaging with spirits. So that's another reason why it's an important basic foundation skill. Whatever, I would say, whatever magical path you're in, if it's any sort of Western magical path, doing daily visualization is something that should be there from the beginning. When I started, I did the tap the stuff, the Golden Dawn, hour a day. I did an hour a day on the red triangle until I could hold that for an hour. I was like 14 at the time. It took me a year and a half to hold it without it changing shape, color, or anything once. But then I moved on to the next one, and it took me 3 months. Then I moved on to the next one, and it took me a week. And by the fourth one, I could do it the first day I did it, I could just visualize it and hold it for an hour without it changing at all. No shape change, no color change, nothing, because my visualization powers had progressed that much in that period of under 2 years of doing an hour a day. And that's the sort of discipline that's the benefit of. People talk about the age of the lodge is dead, and they question the value of organizations like the Golden Dawn. But when you have that discipline there and you do develop your mental muscles by doing the daily practices, it really pays dividends when you progress on to other things and other practices further down the road, because you have developed those base of the pyramid skills. So
Well,
yeah,
I've
I
never met someone who went through the Golden Dawn and became an adept of that system regret it. You know, like if it was such a waste of time, I think have people who are like, wow, I wish I hadn't done that. But the ancient Hellenists considered fantasia a faculty. Rudolf Steiner championed the imagination as a human faculty, and Israel Regardie clearly did as well. What do you
the
think's
memory palace
happened
of the
that
Renaissance.
exactly that Michael Myers Atlanta Fujians, of which Dr. Chato's got some amazing courses that she's going to reveal about that, I believe, if I'm not spilling the beans. So yeah, what do you think happened that the faculties of the mind took such a beating in recent decades?
I think people became obsessed with science. I mean, I'm a great believer in facts, but facts replaced imagination and truth.
Gnosis, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is
Wow, that's a terrifying and powerful expression, eh? Facts replaced gnosis. Oof. Oof, that's a enlightenment kick in the balls.
and I think that's one of the areas where we have a big risk at the moment, is that people use facts as weapons, but then what they think is facts isn't necessarily correct. The idea of like the dead internet theory, where there's so much AI generated content that AI is taking its content from other AI, and so and information isn't being fact checked, and there's a lot of information being put out as fact that isn't actually accurate. And yeah, I mean, I don't use AI. I have concerns about AI. I think it's something that has hugely negative ramifications. And again, it's something that encourages people away from personal creativity. And anything that takes humans away from creativity, in my opinion, is not a good thing.
Well, have you seen the people are now, while they're present with their friends in person, are using AI on their phone to come up with questions and answers to ask their friends in person? This is a thing. Terrifying, eh? Terrifying. They're not going to know how to talk to anyone pretty soon if we keep that up.
Well, the art of conversation, that's another thing, isn't it? It's like, as growing up, in the 70s, and then, as an adult in the 80s, conversation was a really big deal. You wrote letters to people as well, long written
A
letters to
lot.
people.
Yeah.
There's no mobiles. Most when they have a phone in the house. There was one at the end of the street. You had to engage with people. You talk to people. You got pleasure from talking to people and listening, and that to and fro of conversation. And now, when people's attention span is limited to 140 characters or something, like people don't have the same capacity. It seems it's like people are being encouraged, the generations coming through, to not have that same level of critical thought or personal engagement. People are becoming more isolated. I think social media and AI and things like this are pushing people apart. They're not bringing them together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the crisis that I don't know. We saw it coming, and we did nothing to avoid it. Nothing at all. We kind of hailed it and accelerated it, and I don't know what will happen, but it's something that makes me grateful to have been born and grew up when I did. Kind of wish I had gotten to maybe be a bit alive in the 70s and older in the 70s to catch some Zeppelin and Deep Purple and other bands like that. I always tell my mom, who was born in 48, that she was born at the best time. She got the best of everything, and she still gets to see all the technology in VR if she wants to now, though she's more interested in her BBC stories. Because why not? There's some good storytelling. So yeah, the future will be interesting, especially as magicians go into the AI realm and start doing conjurations in AI verses and experiencing spirits through AI rendered forms, and it'll be a big conversation, to be sure. And I don't know what to make of it personally. I was lucky. I also went to Waldorf school, and there you have to write everything by hand. There's no textbooks. You don't get a textbook. There's no formal testing in the normal way. You have to write everything out. And science is showing us now that people who don't write things out by hand, not even typing into a computer, are massively degenerating their own mind and cognitive abilities, not to mention their ability to remember things.
Well, I can tell you the spirits I work with don't like AI.
The what?
The
They
spirits I
don't
work
like
with
AI.
do not like AI at all.
Yes, I've had some experiences where they basically tell me that there's something of a war between the computer realm, the digital realm, and the spirit realm. I've had some experiences of really shocking experiences of almost like there's an aggression between them. I had my computer completely dead off, like hard reset off, did work with a spirit. Computer turned on, did a malfunctioning screen, one of those brightly colored things, and the spirit I was working was like, that's what we're working against. This is our fight against the forces coming through that. And I was shocked because, we rely and make our livings off the computers and internet these days, especially those of us who, because universities, well, they don't want to really teach this stuff. That's why we're having to create parallel systems to communicate, to congregate. So yeah, that's interesting. You said that about the the spirits have said the same similar thing to you.
That's why I've been pushed to do the Claves books. They say there's like the AI is like an obscuring cloud that's muddying the waters for people. So they told me put the stuff out, try and make it as easy as possible for people to communicate with us. We want more people to engage with us. The world is changing and it's impacting into into their realms as well, and so they want us to engage more with them so that we can bring more of their impact in here to try and redress some of that.
Yeah. So let's do a viewer question. The Scottish Wizard says nothing in the Grimoire is about being good. That's the Christian religion. Don't know why it's seen as bad to use magic to make your material life better. The ancients did. Thoughts?
Well, for a start, the whole of the Arbitel is about being an ethical, pious person. There is stuff
That's my
throughout.
first thought.
There are numerous grimoires that talk about the importance of piety, of good practice, and stuff. So, sorry, that statement is completely incorrect. As someone who's gone through pretty much every available grimoire, there's 100 different texts in the grimoire encyclopedia, I say that's categorically wrong. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with using magic to improve your life. Absolutely not. Of course, that is one of the things. Yes, the ancients did it, and we do it, and the grimoires also encourage that. But becoming a better person includes making doing stuff to make your life better as well. So yeah, nothing wrong with doing magic to improve your life and do things to shift probabilities in your favor to get better results for stuff, because that helps you on your path of progress.
Some of the grimoires mandate that you give money to poor people. If you haven't
Yeah.
given alms 3 times that day or week, then you fail. You have to start the process of preparation over again. So yeah, I'm not sure where. Well, I'm not sure. I'd be curious to know what the grimoires the Scottish Wizard has selected as the canon to yield that opinion. But certainly, we know that there was a Christian interpretive lens that dominated after a certain point, right? We can go
Well,
back
of
to the
course.
yeah.
I mean that the whole thing is it's a Christian cosmology, but it's like more like a heretical Christianity. It's not. I say this in the book as well. It's not the Christianity of churches and priests and congregations. It's the Christianity of people doing magic to engage with hierarchies of spirits, which happens to be within that Christian cosmology of like angels and demons and the different orders and what have you. But it's very much different. Like I say, it's more heretical Christianity, but at the same time, it still does encourage a person to living a good life. And maybe some of the later ones on the tail end, sort of in more recent centuries, which are more focused on the demonic stuff, might not have as much. But certainly in those early centuries, where the emphasis is much more angelic, then yeah, absolutely, it does talk about being a good person. And you can see like William Lilly in his autobiography talks about there was a conjurer in London right back in the 17th century who for money used to conjure up demons for people to see. And the demons hated him because he tended to not bathe and be dirty and smelly and drink. And even the demons don't like, because spirits tend to be very sensitive to fragrance, which is why it's the offering that's usually made. They don't like unpleasant smells. And the fact that he was doing it when he was drunk as well was also disrespectful to them. So, yeah, and you see it in all the Cunningham's books as well. This emphasis on good behaviour. So, yeah.
Yeah. One last question from the gallery. While researching ancient Greek initiations, I found periods of purification very common. One required the person to make only true statements with their voice for a week. That's an interesting one to. I mean, most of the time, I think it's important to speak truthfully in general to have a clear conscience, and it's hard to work with spirits when you don't have a clear conscience. Plus, if you generally just tell the truth, it's way less stressful. You notice you don't have to like remember everything and always be telling yourself a story of how things are. You just say, you speak.
It's not. You're not creating a narrative. You are just living your life. If you tell the truth.
Yeah, it's the way to be. Absolutely. And I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the wink wink shamanism issue. I've noticed that a lot of the people who get really furious and frothing at people referring to shamanistic practices or doing shamanism, and I've done a lot of shamanism and I still do a lot of shamanism, and a lot of people get really upset by that. They think I should be canceled just for saying that. Well, I think that the problem with that is, as a North American, is very tricky, because when I've talked to the shamans who I grew up with, we did 7-day-long hikes in the wilderness, built our own sweat lodges with their supervision, and they took us through a ceremony. This is something that we did every year in Waldorf School. The idea that some European, could tell a First Nation shaman in Canada that they're not allowed to transmit their practices to whomever they want, and that those people can't practice it, seems more colonial or totalitarian than the transmission of their tradition organically to us, right? Isn't that weird? So like, by saying that some white dude like me can't do something shamanistic or do a chant that I was taught and dance around a fire and call the Great Spirit the way I was taught to and encouraged to do as much as possible. They're like, oh yeah, we'll teach you this. Please do it as much as you can. That's what they'll tell you. And the idea that you could somehow transitively condemn them for doing that, be like condemning the people who they're teaching, right? Like you're trying to box them into this little cultural ghetto and not allowing them to spread beyond it. It seems like almost that the reverse is happening when people try to indict others for cultural appropriation in that regard. What you're actually doing is ghettoizing the native practitioners themselves. So maybe that's something people should debate or think about before they continue to try and cancel and smear those whiteys who do shamanism. I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, it's that whole thing that's become popular of getting offended on behalf of somebody else. If the other person isn't offended, it's none of your business to get offended on their behalf. Just get on with living your life instead of wasting your time, trying to virtue signal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's good to touch on that because I think people are scared to touch on that often. Now, Sefer HaRazim, to go back to that, we share a favorite text there. Is it a Solomonic grimoire? Is it a proto-Solomonic grimoire? Angels in it later become demons. Do you think this change says more about us humans or indicates shifts in the world of spirits?
I think Sefer HaRazim is it's the earliest sort of proper proto grimoire, really. I mean, it's so good. It's such a great text. It's got so much stuff in there that you see it and you're like, wow, how can you not you know if I read a bit from it. For example, the name of the first firmament is called Shamaim. Within it are encampments filled with wrath, and 7 thrones are prepared there, and upon them are seated overseers, and around them on all sides encampments of angels are stationed, and are obedient to men at the time when they practice magic. Everyone has learned to stand and pour libations in their names, and cite them by their signs at the period when prayer is heard, so as to make a magical rite succeed. So there's these angels. So people are practicing magic. You are you're pouring libations, you're pouring offerings in their names, you're citing them by their signs at the appropriate period of time to make the magic right, when prayer is heard, to make the magic right succeed. You pretty much just describe the conjuration sequence from the grimoires, except it's in the 5th century CE. It's 700 years before any of the grimoires. So to me, it is the proto grimoire. And it also,
So you like that I used that word proto there. I was on to something when I said that. Good, because I'm talking with you about this, about the Sefer HaRazim. That's now we're at the peak of my excitement. So
and the whole thing is the classic planetary thing with the 7 heavens. So which there's so much planetary magic in the grimoire, so it's not surprising it's there in Sefer HaRazim.
And it's old enough that it still clearly has connections to the Hekhalot practices and the Merkavah tradition of descending through the palaces in your chariot, right?
Yeah.
It's still, whereas it would be easy to say, to poo-poo a 17th century grimoire and say it's connected to ancient Jewish Merkavah practices, right? But with the Sefer HaRazim, clearly there's a very strong relationship to the Hekhalot.
I mean, the Merkavah thing is fascinating because it's something I've been interested a lot over the years, because obviously Kabbalah has been one of my big threads, like the grimoires.
Yeah.
When I published Climbing the Tree of Life in 2005, I said I felt that there was a connection with the Merkavah tradition into grimoires, which we just hadn't really seen yet. And then sure enough, in Summa Sacra Magicae, there's bits in there which come straight from the Measure of the Heavenly Body, which is one of the Merkavah texts. And I'm like, thank you very much. But when I was doing the research for the Grimoire Encyclopedia, I'd never really read about it, but I guess I kind of just assumed that the Merkavah stuff kind of phased out around the 9th, 10th century. And then I was finding these, academic essays talking about Merkavah stuff in the 15th, 16th century still going strong. So I thought, that's interesting. So it was running parallel to the grimoires. So it's not surprising that there would be an influence from Merkavah stuff into it, because Summa Sacra Magicae weaves together stuff. It's Greek, Jewish, Arabic, and Latin, i.e., Christian stuff. It's the 4 languages woven together in there. I don't think people have given nearly enough attention to all those subtle threads that came off from the Merkavah tradition, the Hekhalot literature, and how many places that has sort of found its way to. And Sefer HaRazim, I mean, it's a joy, isn't it? You read the descriptions. It's the first text that's really giving you more detailed descriptions, not just of angels, but of their landscape, of the landscape of the heavens that they're in, and the tasks that they do, which, let's face it, are a lot more what you associate with demons later on. Angels to kill people, angels to get people to have sex with you, etc. That it's much more. It's the pre-Christian angels, isn't it? Let's face it. They haven't been Christianized or had that sort of veneer put on them that they only do good stuff.
Which is probably why some of them got recategorized as demonic. There you go, right? Someone clearly worked with some of them, was like, oh, these belong somewhere. Some Christian probably worked with them and was like, oh, these aren't like the rest of them. But that's probably a mistake to remove them from those invocations, because they're part of the litany of names, just like you wouldn't remove the letters that make up the Kakodim and names in Enochian. That just, nature is complete and full and shouldn't be partitioned, probably.
Yeah, so I think Sefer Harazim though is just a wonderful piece, and I hope more people will look at it. If I didn't have numerous other projects to do, I would, one day love to work on putting a new edition of it out at some point. But I've got too many other projects to do.
Yeah, that's a shame. I would love to see that. Some people have made some attempts at handbooks for working with it, like it's a guy, not Ars Notoria, but he called Ars Arcana. It's an anonymous publisher, but I actually like his work, or whoever's work it is. But yeah, there hasn't been much done. It needs its own Claves Spirituum for that. Dr. Sledge is going to do a whole Hekhalot course that he's starting for free on his YouTube. So Esoteric, a YouTube channel, free course coming up on Hekhalot by the great Dr. Sledge, who will also be at Enochian Con here in person with us, which is going to be exciting. I'm picking both him and Aaron Leach and Dr. Terry Burns up this Thursday at Vancouver Airport, and it's going to be I can't believe this is actually happening. Oh my lord, it's wild. I mean, yeah, I can barely contain my excitement. And with that, let's do the last commercial, and then we'll do just a few more questions as long as you have time for. But we'll do one last little commercial here to promote one of the great benefits of joining this year as opposed to any other year. If you're thinking, oh, I could wait till next year or another year, well, there's a reason to join this year. And Dr. Sasha Chato has taken her whole 2-semester undergraduate level Intro to Western Esotericism course, given it to us. She built it in the back end of the Arcane Research Society website already. We start it in November, and everyone who signs up for Enochian Con before the event gets it for free. Everyone else after that can do a monthly payment plan or pay all at once or something. But at universities, people, this would be like $4 or $5 grand minimum. It's just how it is. And so we've done our best to make it as affordable as possible and free for everyone who joins Enochian Con this week.
The Arcane Research Society proudly presents Dr. Sasha Chato's Introduction to Western Esotericism, a fully online course with over 45 hours of recorded lectures. Study at your own pace with a course guide, reading lists, and immersive activity packs. Designed for practitioners and for scholars, it's engaging yet challenging with expert support from Dr. Chato. Watch 2,000 years of esoteric history unfold, from the mystic currents of Hermetism, Neoplatonism, and Gnosticism to the alchemical fires of the Renaissance and the evolving traditions of modern occulture. Uncover hidden truths, debunk myths, and trace esoteric thought through time. With over 20 years in education, a champion of scholar-practitioner dialogue, Dr. Chato has taught this course since 2010 to hundreds of satisfied students. Get this course free with a ticket to Enochian Con 2025. After that, it's $1,500 Canadian dollars for Arcane Research Society members or $2,000 Canadian dollars for non-members with lifetime access.
See, oh, I'm muted. That's Corfu that we see, the island where Dr. Chato lives, where we might be able to manage to do a ARS pilgrimage in the next couple of years to there. That would be fun. And so, yes, just for people who know, a lot of people online are saying, are whether intentional or not, are pretending that our fees are in US dollars. They're not. So, for example, 2,000 Canadian dollars is 1,400 American, and then after paying provincial taxes and all of that, we're talking much less. So, yeah, that's the reality of being a Canadian. Move here at your own risk. I know a lot of people have joked about coming to a Nokia con and losing their passports, and it's like, well, you know, each country has its benefits and its problems. It really does, and I would kill for the cheaper healthcare in the States, because here we pay a ton for it, and we often can't get any. Not always. I've had very positive recent experiences, so. Just want to throw that out there before you think too much the grass is already green, always greener, or think your own country is like in ruins. It's like the internet's not real a lot of the time, right? And if you go outside and see what you got, you'll probably find it's not so bad after all. You've recently moved from England to Spain. How's that been? Do you miss merry old?
It took a little bit of adjustment, but I love it here now. It is very different, different style of life, different climate, much hotter.
Yeah.
That's adjusting to. Spanish bureaucracy is horrendous and way worse than it is in Britain. But there's other things that are different. I mean, childcare here is way cheaper than Britain, like a fraction of the cost. You know, what you pay for a month here, you would pay for like something like 3 days in Britain.
Yeah. I believe it. Yeah, I haven't gotten to spend much time in Spain, unfortunately. I did get to spend 2 weeks in Mallorca when I was an exchange student in Vienna. My host family had a villa there, so that was lucky. Had my own patio to do rituals under Hail Bop above me in the night sky. Remember Hail Bop? All hail Bop. Bop Kabbalah, as Ginsberg would call it. So Spain, my plan is to do the Camino, and so maybe when I do that, I can visit you. Maybe you'll join me for a wee hike one day. Are you on the path of the Camino at all?
No, we're not. That's more up north from where we are. Because we're down in down in southern Spain, near Sevilla. But no, I do like it here. It is very different. But after the initial adjustment period, and me slowly learning Spanish, it's not as easy to learn new languages when you're older. But I'm getting there. You know, I really like it, and my lifestyle enables me to, you know, spend a good amount of my time with my daughter. You know, she's at nursery from sort of 9 to 1:30, and then so I work during that time, and I work when she's gone to bed at night, and the rest of the time, you know, is basically for her.
Yeah, are you a nighttime writer or a morning writer, or whenever you can find the time writer?
I kind of whenever I can find the time. I tend to do my editing work in the morning. You know, when I'm editing other people's books. But I like doing that in the morning. It's all quiet. But yeah, it's just whenever I can fit it in, really. And I'll always have a couple of books on the go at the same time, so that if I'm feeling, you know, I'm not really feeling it for one book or making progress, then I can go back to another one. So, you know, when I started on Claves Spirituum, I had actually started doing a bit for volume 3 of the Grimoire Encyclopedia. But then it was like, nope, Claves Spirituum gets your full attention for the coming months. And that is all. You're going to be woken up in the middle of the night with stuff in your head that you've got to quickly write down that the spirits have told you in your dream, when you're lucid dreaming. You're going to be in the shower and the spirits are going to tell you stuff that you've got to rush out and type up so that you don't forget what you need to check up on. And, you know, I didn't really have a choice. But, you know, I will be going back to working on volume 3 of the Grimoire Encyclopedia in the near future as well, because there's lots more to do.
That's exciting. What can we expect with volume 3?
It's going to be completely different to volumes 1 and 2. That's all I'll say. It's going to be completely different sort of chunk of material and direction. I'm focusing more on imagery rather than text.
Fascinating. That's very exciting. I honestly was expecting you to say, well, it's just more grimoires that didn't make it into the first 2, but no, this is something completely different, a new focus, which is I mean, you're really pioneering a lot of new ground these days, it seems. Who else are you very excited about who's doing similar pioneering work to you? What other texts are coming out or have come out that you really are on your top 10 list?
Well, anything that Joe Peterson brings up is immediately on my top of my list.
I mean, that almost goes without saying, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm waiting for my copy of Black Raven, Al Cummings and Brian Johnson. I'm excited to see that.
Beautiful production on that book too.
Yeah.
Beautiful production. Like, what a cover! What a cover!
I mean, for me, because I'm editing quite a lot of people's books, so I don't want to sort of talk about books that aren't that close necessarily yet. But I mean, another one I'm really looking forward to seeing coming out is the Sefer HaAtot of Sarah Mastros, illustrated by Elizabeth Imperian. That's a gorgeous book. That's anyone who's into Solomonic Pentacles, that's going to be a must-have book. Really nice.
Are you excited for Frater Acker's book on the Olympic spirits?
Yeah, that would be another one to see. I mean, the Olympics are a big thing. I mean, I haven't got round yet to getting those new German publisher ones that have come out on, with German texts that have been translated. But
unfortunately, they're not. They don't contain the German original, so you're just getting the translators of interpretation. It would be nice if they had put out the German as well. I was about to buy it, and then I realized, it's already translated. Well, that doesn't really excite me as much. It's still fun. It's great to have 5 manuscripts in one. But I mean, I guess this is my public appeal. Some of us, a second edition could have German and English or something. There's a lot of German speakers in the world. It's not like yeah.
I mean, I've got a few years back we had a fire which trashed our place, and unfortunately started in the library, and so there's still gaps in my collection that have been.
Sorry to hear that. It's brutal.
These things happen. Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
There's bits where Stephen immediately sent me a complete set of Golden Horde books, for example, and I got a complete set of Hadean and Llewellyn contacted me, and they asked if there was anything that I particularly needed to replace. So I got things like the Book of Oberon sent to me, and I really appreciated that. So a good chunk did get replaced quickly, but there's still when you've spent so many years, and some of the books are not that easy or cheap to get. So there's still a few gaps that I want to sort of fill in the next coming couple of years. But yeah, there's a lot coming out. It's hard to keep up with these days. There's so much.
Oh yeah, it's actually. I mean, we could have worse problems than not being able to have time for all the great grimoires and books that are available. People are always shocked when I don't have every single book that comes out and haven't read every single book that comes out. It's like there's a really important lesson there. Like you have to. Decisions are important, and they're crucial. They're creative, and there's power in choices. You have to decide what you have time for in life and what matters, and focus on that. There's no advantage to be gained with knowing a little bit about everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for me, I was sort of pushed in that direction, but I really felt I want to be at the moment putting out practical material about working the system, rather than another translation. I'm not knocking the translations and things, but at the end of the day, it's a translation of a grimoire, which is going to be almost all grimoires are piecemeal, but put together bits of stuff. They're not coherent working systems. I wanted to put stuff that was like coherent and systemic, that someone can pick it up. You can pick up Claves Intelligentiarum, having never done anything with the grimoires, go through it all and do the practice. It tells you how to do everything. That was more where I'm at the moment. Like, I want to put out stuff that's more like template, manual stuff that people can draw, use the whole thing or draw from as they want, that hopefully they will get value into their practices for conjuration with. So that's more where my focus is in the writing front.
You wrote a great book that's, I don't know if it's overlooked or how popular it is, just because I don't have my ear to those communities, so I wouldn't know. But it's on Wicca and the magical beginnings of Wicca. And I was very delighted to discover Wicca when I was young. To this day, some of the most shocking and powerful experiences I had were with my little high school Wiccan coven with 2 other guys. And, I think there's power in youth. Also, you don't know necessarily all the safeguards, and so you're a little reckless, and that can lead to some shocking phenomena, if not full-on apparitions, which it did, And so Wicca, it's sad for me to see recently Wicca take this beating, first from the Tradwitch developments in communities, but now it seems that it's taking a secondary beating because people have discovered that so much of Wicca comes out of the Golden Dawn tradition and therefore the Grimoire tradition as well. I was wondering if you had any comforting thoughts or different perspectives that might be especially comforting to those Wiccans out there who feel lambasted and blindsided by the recent polemics against their practice and tradition.
I was initiated into Wicca back in '91. Ran a number of covens, in Alexandrian. Not really done Wicca for quite a long time. But yeah, Wicca Magical Beginnings was, I did the research and wrote that because I wanted to look at, I don't care whether Gerald Gardner at the end of the day made it up, whether it's initiated. I wanted to, by X, Y, or Z, so many people got wrapped up in who knew who and who was doing what. My primary things of a system are, does it work? Is it useful? It's those sort of principles. And I think there's this beautiful, simple elegance to Wicca in its early form before people started trying to bolt stuff onto it and make it into more of this earth religion thing. It was basically stripped down grimoire magic at the beginning. And
thank you for saying that.
That's what I basically proved in Wicca Magical Beginnings, with looking at all the practices, showing where they come from, how much of it came from, the Key of Solomon, and there's other bits from elsewhere. So I've actually kind of got 3/4 written. So I felt that Wicca Magical Beginnings, it was presented like it could be this, but I think it's this. I'm sort of writing. I've actually written a part. It's nearly finished. A book which is sort of like Wicca's grimoire roots, going through and showing the exact bits. This comes from here, this comes from here, this comes from here. Because there's some material I found which adds extra intrigue into there that nobody seems to have spotted, about where some of the material might have come from in Wicca. And also the second part of the book, I've actually gone through and pumped it full of the visualizations and things that I taught people in Wicca, because my biggest problem with Wicca was, the end of the day, magic it's always about having the correct balance between force and form. And the Wiccan Book of Shadows is all about form and there's no force. It doesn't give any of the visualization. It doesn't tell you what's going on energetically when you do the stuff, so it can become theatre of magic. So what I have done is gone through and I'm putting in all the stuff the way that I taught all the things like the consecrations in Wicca and all the other bits, and the visualizations, the energetic stuff to go with it. So I'm kind of offering that as a, because it's the stuff I created and taught, I don't consider it to be oath breaking to do so. But so I'm going to offer that out as a, here's stuff you can do if you want your Wicca to be more essentially ritual magic-y, that focuses on that side of it and doesn't get lost in the like the Wheel of the Year and all the subsequent add-ons that make it incoherent. It got sort of, it's, people like Scott Cunningham and Silver Rave Wolf, etc., going onwards and stuff, and Wicca is not as a sort of non-initiatory tradition. So it all just muddied it from that original root of this lovely stripped down grimoire system. And so this book is basically going back to the roots of stripped down grimoire, Wicca, and doing it, in the style of someone who's also been doing ritual magic and grimoires for many.
See, it fascinates
many
me that there's such a high premium placed these days on direct experience with spirits and methods of working and even systems of working based on direct experience with spirits. But at the same time, then sort of contrarily or parallel, you have people criticizing Wicca because it was formed from these earlier traditions of practice and is based on, therefore, just doing things that work, right? It's contradictory critiques, right? You can't have this one thing being esteemed and this other thing being downcast when actually they're functionally the same. They're based on effectiveness and interacting directly with spirits. I got to throw this on the screen because Scottish Wizard, we didn't do him dirty or anything, but he misspoke. When he was talking about the non-Christian, non-pious stuff, he actually meant the PGM rather than the grimoires. And he says he bows to your superior knowledge, gents. Oh, well, to both of our. Thank you. I'm I'd love to be considered in Mr. Rankine's league of magical knowledge. I'm honored. Thank you, Scottish Wizard. Yes, so the PGM.
Yeah. PGM, definitely. Well, that's sorcery for hire, essentially. So yeah, that's about your magic has to work for you to get paid and have food in your mouth and a roof over your head. So yeah, that's definitely from a period where the ethics were not such a prime concern for the people doing that. I would agree 100% with him on that.
And someone said that the PGM is far from the high magic of its day, quote unquote, something like, whatever, and is kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel of Greco-Egyptian magic. Well, actually, I think that was Skinner who said that in his dissertation, perhaps, I think. Yes. So yeah, there was other forms of magic. We just don't have as many documents or manuscripts or oral traditions of it because, well, history.
But going back to Wicca for a moment, I think that
please,
if you ignore all those, like I say, the overlays and all the TikTok Wicca and all the other stuff, and actually go back to looking at the early stuff, and if you take that early style and then you incorporate in other bits from, for example, the grimoires which are compatible and visualization and things, you have a lovely group system of practice. And in a way that you don't really with the grimoires, because it's generally done in this day and age solo or a very small group of people. So going back to that does actually offer an opportunity for people to do spirit-based work from a different angle. And there are people like Frate Barabbas who are kind of taking that kind of approach. I think his new book has some stuff on this kind of topic in it. I was sent a copy a while back, and he was looking very much with that practical approach to spirit-based work, but from a Wiccan angle. So, there are people out there who are doing that as well.
Yeah, Barabbas is an interesting one. I've never spoken with him, but he was on my friend Frater BT's Esoteric podcast, which actually I was just on again on Tuesday for 4.5 hours. And we won't go with 4.5 hours. Don't worry. I have to go get to the university and sign some contracts. But Frater Barabbas, when he was on my friend's podcast, at first didn't impress me at all until my friend started asking questions, the right questions. And then I was really blown away with the nuance of his thought and understanding and experience. So I was very excited to see that he was putting out the kinds of books he's putting out in the last since then, and taking what you're describing very seriously and offering. And it's nice because I just, it really does make me sad to see people trashing each other's traditions. Perhaps I took the words of the Golden Dawn Hiearchs to heart when they said, "Don't desecrate what's holy in another's eyes." And it's sad to see this kind of vitriol between traditions these days, but that is the social media mind virus at work, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disheartening, and but hey, that's why we fight back and push back and try and bring beauty into the world with poetry and magic and art.
And the oral tradition of talking like this to spread the words in the in the communicated form rather than written as well.
If the magical oral tradition suffered greatly over the last, say, 1,000 years or 1,500 years, it's safe to say, I bet, that in the 21st century, we're definitely doing our share to bring it back to vitality.
Absolutely.
Like, how many hundreds of hours have we all talked? And I'm new to this podcasting world, relatively less than 10 years, right? Can you imagine being a kid coming along in 20 years from now to getting into magic and being like, well, where do I start? It won't be like, oh, there's not many good books out there. It'll be like, well, first sit down. We've got these little things that hold your eyes open. Don't mind the Beethoven. We have 1,000 hours of footage for you to watch just today. How can I watch 1,000 hours of footage? Don't worry, we have a new plug-in for your brain that lets that happen. So you experience time slower with adrenaline spikes. Is that healthy? It doesn't matter. We have spare bodies for you if you need to get a cloned body. It'll be a wild time, once we're gone, to imagine. I like to imagine that. Like, do you ever think you have a fiction book in you, or have you already done one?
I've put out a couple under pseudonyms in the past, but funnily enough, I am actually writing a magical fiction book at the moment as well.
You are, so not pseudonymously.
No, I'm writing one as me.
A real one.
Yeah, a real one, which is currently at about 33,000 words. So
Oh, wow, wonderful.
It's the plot of it is entirely based on dream sequence I had, as is volume 2, because it's going to be a series. And it's just carried on happening in the dreams, that my dreams are unfolding this story of these sort of various characters, magical characters and spirits and things. So, I'm just sort of waking up and typing it up.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to hear that. I will definitely be one of the first readers. Yeah, I have the pseudonymous novels out there as well. But definitely would like to write a serious occult fiction book. And I love that yours is coming out of dreams. That is so cool. That is, yeah. So when you don't edit in the morning, you write a few pages of your creative story. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Wow. I don't know how long we've been talking. Do you have a bit more time to see if I have any other questions, or shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, it's 10 past midnight here, so
it's late there. And we've really covered a lot. Yeah, I don't think oh, last question then. You are a delightful includer of footnotes, not the accursed endnotes in your books, and you credit others. You credit what I think Hans-Georg Gadamer called the community of interpreters, right? The many voices that lead to our own ideas. So you don't just cite published books where ideas come from or are credited. You even cite people who have shared ideas and give them credit. And why is crediting beginning to be seen as a lack of knowledge rather than a knowledge of sources? And where do we go from here?
I don't know. For me, it's important, if I'm talking with somebody and they say something and that inspires me, I like to give that person credit for having, like caused that bolt of inspiration. Or somebody says something about a practice they do. I mean, it's like Alexander F. We were chatting some time ago, and he mentioned how he used the line from Claves Spirituum and with this sign, I seal the circle at the end of the creation of the magic circle. And I thought, I love that. That makes so much sense. So I then included it in my practice. But because I now do it as part of my template, I felt it's only appropriate to say, I got this idea from Alexander F. because he does it and he told me about it. To me, building on the work of others and letting people know where you got it from is not a negative thing. I think it reflects on the fact that we are a community and that we learn from each other. There's like when magicians come together, hopefully there is a synergy of ideas that produces new and better things and ways of doing stuff. So I always like to credit where I've been inspired by somebody to do something. I don't see that as a failing or a weakness. I think it's also a respect for the people and to sort of respect those like friends and colleagues and the work that they're doing by pointing out that something they did or said inspired me in my practice. It's something that I think is important. People should be given credit. It's really annoying when people just do stuff and don't give any credit to where it's come from or who it's come from.
And I think it comes from this, the thing that I feel like might be lacking, why younger people coming up don't understand that, is that there hasn't been instilled the appreciation of knowing where your thoughts and ideas come from, right? Like if you think up a new philosophy, well, chances are it's been discussed in the past at length, critiqued, counter-argued, died, was resuscitated in a new way, and repeat that cycle, right? So knowing that where your thoughts stand in the tradition of human thought really is a powerful bit of knowledge. That is knowledge in itself. And I struggle with trying to explain that to people who because I stopped basically being interested in publishing books in 2020 because I was getting so criticized for citing my sources. Like they thought it was proof that I was too dumb to have an original idea. Whereas I'm like, or I just, I just actually I'm such a, avid scholar. I've researched every idea I've ever had and found out who thought some version of it in the past. And now I can comment on it. And that commentary is original.
That's really ironic because in academia, you have to cite your sources all the time.
Well, I come out of academia.
Yeah. Who don't have the experience of actually being done at that high intellectual level are failing to grasp that quoting your sources and showing your process is actually at the top end of the scale, not at the bottom end. I mean, I footnote horrendously as well from the point of view of a lot to give the sources so people can follow up and see my train of thought and things. I think it's important that you don't, and I don't present as truth, I present it as a way that works for me. And this is the conclusion, this is the process that brought me to the conclusions and experience that makes it work. It's
Yeah, and my book, I was written as an academic thesis, so I had to footnote it and cite it accurately to be accepted into my PhD, which I was. And but to the practitioner, it was written as a book of epiclesis, invocation, and spiritual alchemy. For the academic, it was written as a book of ethics and hermeneutics, and I did both at the same time, and I thought it would be very popular and well received, but no, it got me. It made me just want to vanish for the rest of my life. The reception was brutal. And so I don't know what to do about that, but I'll work through it. It was nice to talk to you about that on the way out, because I don't know when we'll get to speak again. You're busy. You're a busy man. I like to think I'm busy. And then sometimes I talk to people like you. I'm like, I think you might be busier because you throw the kid in there and Yeah, that person probably has a bit more on their plate even than I. So we have a beautiful question to end on, to bookend. David, says JG, you did a book on the Shekinah some time ago. I loved your book. I've long wondered about personal experiences with the Shekinah and where you find her influence most beneficial in your own life. Yeah, I'm just being funny.
I'm glad you like the book. That's one of my personal favourites. And so,
what's the title?
The Cosmic Shekinah. And then it's a subtitle.
I might have missed that one.
The Wisdom Goddess in the Ancient World and in Kabbalah or something like that. And goes back tracing through to Asherah and the parallels with Sophia and looking at Inanna and the other sort of early wisdom goddesses. So bringing the Shekinah into my template for the Grimoire stuff has been a delight because it puts this completely different dynamic and balance into it's now all about the divine feminine and divine masculine for the conjuration process. And I'm going to digress a little bit here. But, there's one of the models of creation in Kabbalah is that the universe and all the souls of humans and angels are formed by the Shekinah as a circle of fire around God as the point on the throne in the center. And so, she is literally the mother of angels. That every human has a spark of the divine Shekinah in them, that our divine spark, our soul, is a fragment of the Shekinah from when the Shekinah's light was shattered with the shattering of the vessels. This would go on a whole Kabbalistic chat here, which we don't really have the time to do. But from the point of view of doing conjuration, then, by calling on the Shekinah, so not just doing a prayer to God, but also doing prayer to the Shekinah, it's like that we're activating the part of the Shekinah that's within us, which gives us the authority to engage with the spirits because we're activating that part of the divine feminine that is Shekinah in our soul, then for the engagement. For me, what the influence of the Shekinah has been most, I think, in my appreciation of the world around me, just in having more of an appreciation for beauty in unexpected places, in unexpected things, and trying to be. It's back to that magical thing, really, of trying to be a better person. I see the Shekinah as being the sort of that which unites all of us. We all have a spark of her, of that divine feminine wisdom, of that incredible creativity. She's the breath of life. There's just so much. I mean, if you read the Cosmic Shekinah, you'll see I kind of really go off. Originally, that was going to have practical stuff in it as well, but it got turned down by the publishers because it's too academic. You get that thing again. But some of the exercises I created with the Shekinah, like making the Shekinah oil, there's stuff from things like the books of Enoch, because obviously Shekinah's in there, are in Claves Spirituum. And the other time when I think I really feel the presence of the Shekinah is whenever I smell fragrances. There's that thing of a fragrance, like where are we now? In April here, all the orange trees, the blossom is in the orange trees, and you walk down the street and you just get the smell of the orange blossom, and it's absolutely beautiful. And that every time I would leave the house and walk down the road, every day, more than once a day, I would get that fragrance of the orange blossom, and it would just always make me think about the connection we all have and about the Shekinah. And so every time I smell a flower, especially roses are particularly associated with her, but any flower, it makes me think of the Shekinah because she's particularly associated with fragrance, and fragrance is said to invite her. So yeah, it's just like an ongoing presence. I mean, I suppose my relationship with Shekinah is kind of how a lot of people or how they God. I focus more on Shekinah than on the divine masculine. So I hope that answers the
Well,
question.
Malkut and Kether are one, and we experience the oneness of the divine through the slower manifestation of that oneness, that monad in creation. And that makes perfect sense to us Kabbalists, right? And your Kabbalistic books, I highly recommend them to people. All of your books I recommend to people. They are great books. Heka, the Egyptian one with all the cool gestures that I've gotten to incorporate when I do Golden Dawn Godform working now. That's cool. That should be in the Golden Dawn teaching curriculum. Hell yeah. Thank you for everything that you've contributed to my life. I can thank you personally because it's great to have you alive and doing what you're doing in this world. And thank you so much for reaching out and wanting to be a part of a NokiaCon. I was honored, and it's a pleasure. And hopefully we'll have you at future ones as well. I certainly want to get you there in person to the one in Prague in 2027, and maybe we can even throw Steven Skinner in the back of a car or a trunk and just kidnap him for a little fun at Kelly's Tower. Stranger things have happened, I'm sure. The future is what we make of it, right?
Absolutely.
All right, David Rankine, thank you very much. Have a wonderful sleep, my friend, and I'll see you. I'll see you at a NokiaCon. And people, go get Claves Spirituum. Any last words?
Thank you for having me. It's been a delight, and I'm just really happy that we didn't repeat anything of the chat with Alexandra and went off on other tangents to cover other topics. It's like you said, you don't want to have interviews where you're just saying the same thing. You always want to talk about other things, and particularly you're hitting topics that I'm very passionate about. So
key points need to be repeated, but I have always made a practice on my podcast of listening to as many hours as I need to of the recent talking points someone has been put through, so that I don't replicate them, unless there's something I really want to get deeper on. But yeah, that's how I roll. I'm academic at heart. It's I think there's a lot of value in the union of scholarship and practical experience. And I know I'm not the only one. And that's what we're creating with this little new society of ours, and who knows, maybe one day the university will give us some of their billions of dollars to make it official in that world. But if not, we don't need them. We even don't need publishers, but thank God we have them. Thank you, Haitian Press, and all the other publishers who put out these beautiful, beautiful books for us. Your work does not go unnoticed. Absolutely, our thanks to you for doing so much heavy lifting, because it's a lot of work to do all of that stuff. And there was one last thing I needed to say, I think, actually, but what was it? Oh yes, this if you like the format, did you like the little commercial breaks? Is it fun to have a commercial break?
Yeah.
Just a little to gather yourself. So I want to keep streaming live. People, please send a super chat or donate some money to pay for this really overpriced software that does an amazing job at letting us do this. I'm going to keep developing more commercials and promo videos, and I have fun sound designers and graphic artists who want to work with me to create like the funnest experience possible in this format. So if you guys can throw in some super chats or anything like that, my thanks, and thank you, David Rankine, and enjoy this outro video with props to me on flute and bouzouki and guitar, and a Canadian Juno award-winning musician Justin Hagberg on keys, with sound design by Facebook at Kesha at Evo Carlux. Oops. Cheerio.
Bye.
Unless the eye catch fire, the god will not be seen. Unless the ear catch fire, the God will not be heard. Unless the tongue catch fire, the God will not be named. Unless the heart catch fire, the God will not be loved. Unless the mind catch fire, the God will not be known.